Mr. Alexander Thomas, we are very pleased to have you here today on the topic transhumanism. I'm not going to spoil the fun parts. I'm going to let the introduction and the background part to yourself. So could you please briefly introduce yourself and your background in biotechnology and even transhumanism and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my name is Alexander Thomas, as you say. I'm a filmmaker and academic. I lead the BA in media production at the University of East London over here, and I also teach on the BA and MA film courses. What brought me to transhumanism was my PhD, which was looking at the political and ethical implications of transhumanist technologies, and in particular that they're emerging into a kind of context of advanced capitalism. So it was really thinking through both the ways capitalism produces certain types of technologies and people, and how that informs our kind of techno-human trajectory, if you like, but also how transhumanist aspirations and kind of the imaginations they make are informed by or reflective of capitalism.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. So what inspired you to explore transhumanism, and how did you get involved in this field?
Okay, yeah. So I was making films. I'd done an MA in film directing, and I was kind of starting to make some films, and I did a bit of teaching part-time just to make some extra money. Mm-hmm. And that actually led to an opportunity of a full-time lectureship, which I wasn't too sure about at the time because I wanted to carry on making films. But I took it, and I didn't have a PhD, so the university insisted that I do one. Mm-hmm. So a couple of years before that, I'd seen an exhibition over here at a place called the Welcome Welcome Museum, and the exhibition was called Superhuman. And it was really a kind of history of human medical enhancement technologies, you know, from innocuous things like glasses through to trainers and so on. But the last bit looked at the future of enhancement technologies. And that was maybe 12 years or so ago now, maybe a bit more. And what came out of that exhibition, when I came out of that exhibition, I was really thinking, how is this not all anybody was talking about? The exhibition kind of showed you the radical possibilities it claimed were going to be our near future. And I found that like quite sobering, dizzying, exciting, but also a little bit disorienting. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do a PhD, you know, that's kind of what I would like to do it in. So that's what drew me in. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. And yeah, you're right. It's a very interesting and new field. How was it never a trend? And now, thanks to you, people are paying more attention to it. So if you want to dive deeper into transhumanism, how would you define transhumanism in the simplest terms for those kind of unfamiliar with the concept?
Sure. So I would say transhumanism is a philosophy that claims that we should radically enhance the human condition. And we should do that using technoscience. Essentially, you could think of it as self-directed human evolution. So humans taking their evolution into their own hands. And you can think of things like genetic engineering, brain-to-computer interfaces, at the extreme end, even notions such as mind uploading, so uploading your mind to a computer, for example.
Wow.
So transhumanists they aim to radically increase human lifespan, broaden our physical capacities and make us much more intelligent, potentially even fusing our minds with digital technology such as AI. And they also imagine exponential growth in these technologies, leading to radical leaps forward. So that could potentially bring about, they think, immortality, radical abundance, the creation of superintelligence, space colonization, and even the engineering of paradise. These are all ideas that transhumanists espouse. So in a way, if you think of the history of scientific and technological progress as the attempt to use nature to better serve our needs, transhumanism, I would say, is the revision of human nature to better serve our fantasies.
Oh, wow, serving our fantasies. And so when we're talking about it like this, it seems like now humanity can see reaching that level to actually start doing those things. But technically speaking, what are the biggest scientific advancements driving transhumanism forward today? And what are the recent things that we reached in this field?
Yeah, so it's actually a converging suite of technologies, which are sometimes called NBIC, which kind of makes some of these ideas thinkable. And NBIC stands for nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive science. So nanotech is technology on a very small scale. So even on the scale of individual atoms and molecules, there's a concept, a transhumanist concept really, called atomically precise manufacturing. So the idea that parts of the nanotechnological dream would be that we could engineer things at the atomic scale, and that could help us turn smoke into strawberries, cancer tissue into healthy tissue, anything we want, create radical abundance. Now, biotechnology is things like genetic engineering, and as you probably know, in 2003 we kind of understood the whole human genome, and later we developed technologies such as CRISPR-Cas9, which allows us to edit genes and so on. So all of that would fall under the kind of biotechnological aspect, the B of NBIC. Infotech includes computing generally, as we know, information technology, but also very importantly now, artificial intelligence is very much coming to the fore, and that AI is seen as this kind of almost abstract force that could unlock so much power and knowledge that could allow us to do all sorts of things. And then you can start to put that together with developments in quantum computing, for example. So that's a factor. And of course, finally, cognitive science is the study of the human mind. And it's the fusion of those four kind of groupings of technology coming together, which offers these profound possibilities. So, for example, if you take brain to computer interfaces, such as those designed by Elon Musk's company Neuralink, that contains biotech, infotech, and cognotech all together in the same system. So yeah, hopefully that gives some sense of some of the real world emergence of these possibilities through these technologies.
Yeah, and now that we keep getting closer to the day that we reach a final product of transhumanism, how do you think society is going to get it? Like, are they ready for such development and advancement, or how is that going to be?
I don't think we are ready. No, I don't think it's so much that we're I don't think it's that we're moving too fast per se. Obviously, the technology is developing very quickly, but it's more that we have a global, I would say, socioeconomic context that is not likely to generate positive outcomes. So at the moment, these processes are directed by what you could call a competitive and an instrumentalist fitness landscape, by which I mean we've got vying nation states, competing nation states, and also, the kind of advanced capitalist competition. So that means that the primary motivating forces that are kind of directing techno-human developments are power and profit. That's what, is underpinning these developments. So that doesn't lend itself, I think, to pluralistic, inclusive forms of human flourishing. Rather, it kind of moves us towards expropriation, exploitation, and I think ultimately it'll be death and destruction for most, if not all, people. Wow. And unfortunately, of course, even if we somehow all had the best intentions, the sheer complexity of developing and introducing radically potent technologies into society could still have devastating impacts. But unfortunately, we have nothing like the best intentions directing the process at the moment. We've got a lot of greed, a lot of hatred, unfortunately, directing things. So speed is an issue, but I think, because it adds this additional challenge of unpredictability and so on. But I think it's not the issue. I think it's unfortunately, it's our social structures that are in place that make it very unlikely this is all going to end well, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I hope that's going to end well, actually. So do you think there should be limits to some aspects of it?
Limits. Well, so I think it's difficult because some people talk about things like red lines, for example, right? You go, oh no, we can't go past this point. And I don't think that's the best way to go about it. Because for me, it's not a question of drawing these random lines, because who gets to draw those lines in the first place, right? Again, you've got the problem of power and profit, which would lead to the drawing of these lines, frankly. So at the moment, it's mainly tech billionaires who get to try to, determine and imagine the future of humanity. But of course, even they are severely limited by their tiny ability to deal with the radical complexity of the world. And also they are also, bound up in other power struggles with each other and with society at large. So, at the moment, the decisions they're making unsurprisingly, tend to involve extending their own power. This is why we see increasing levels of surveillance technology, the desire for data. So, we see new concepts like surveillance capitalism, data colonialism, techno-feudalism. They've started to emerge to understand these kind of power-grabbing forms that we're seeing, enacted by billionaires and states. So all of that, I think, is underpinned by this kind of urge for control. So I don't think we should try and draw red lines and say, oh, no, this is too far, because it's not really about red lines. I think it's more about who gets to define the future. How could we create a more democratic, more inclusive, pluralistic politics? How can we maybe reject the visions and fantasies of billionaires, which are self-serving? But at the same time, life is process. So things are always going to change and the possibilities will change. And sometimes if you draw red lines and say, no, this is absolutely out, then I think that's quite limiting, because you need to revisit that constantly as the context changes. So for me, the question is how we can ensure these kind of, democratic, ethical, political contestations are informed and inclusive, rather than saying this is a line we should not cross.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And speaking a bit about ethical concerns, what do you think are the most ethical concerns we need to address before transhumanism becomes mainstreamed?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I think even to kind of understand how we think about ethics would be a good start. So the idea that ethics, in transhumanism, often the idea is that ethics can be solved. It's a technical problem. So we could, I don't know, a super intelligence could fix all ethical problems. But I think that is a complete misunderstanding of what ethics are, because ethics come from being a situated being. It's like it can only be from your perspective. And ethics will always be contested, because to do one thing, it might impact somebody else in a negative way. That's the nature of things. So there is no simple correct answer. Also, everything we do has ethical implications. Some people say, oh, well, just, don't come at me with your ethics, because don't give me regulations or whatever. We should all be free. But the problem is, the things we do impact other people. They do have ethical implications. So I think ethics are unavoidable. But there's no transcendent truth to ethics, in my opinion. There is only situated, ongoing contestations. Transhumanists often use what's called utilitarian ethical stances. And that kind of is just like almost a calculating approach to ethics. What will be the consequence? But in order to figure out the consequence of something, you need to imagine that you've got a godlike position that can see what the consequences are going to be. And that doesn't exist. So, transhumanism already has a bit of a God complex. So you add this utilitarian thinking into there, and that's quite a dangerous combination. So for me, ethics should always lie at the heart of transhumanist aims, but it should be about power. It should be about who gets to decide what enhancement is, who gets access to these enhancements, how is human agency affected by the technologies, and what are the implications of that? How do we ensure that there is agency? How can we ensure transhumanist processes are inclusive, pluralistic, and enable flourishing for both humans and non-humans on this planet? We're already destroying huge parts of nature. How do we ensure that this process doesn't just do more of that? So all of these are significant challenges, I'd say. But I definitely don't think we should try and outsource ethics to scientists and technologists. I think rather scientists and technologists need to come and study ethics and philosophy.
Oh, all right. So now that we talked about like a little bit of the challenges and stuff like that, let's try to look ahead a bit. So looking ahead, what are the most promising developments in human enhancement that we might see in the next 10 to 20 years? I mean, I think it's really hard to say. I know that's a bit of a disappointing answer in a way. You'd love to say, right, well, okay.
And I can give you some stuff like in 2035, there are transhumanists that insist we'll have what's called longevity escape velocity, which means every year you age, they will be able to slow your aging by a year, which means effectively you stop aging, and soon after they can start reversing your aging. So they say if you live to 2035, you'll be able to live forever. You know, there are transhumanists that argue this kind of thing. Also, super intelligence is another one that's constantly spoken about now as AI improves. This argument that artificial intelligence will exceed human capacity intelligence, you know, and there's people now speculating that will happen in the next 12 months even, you know. Okay. Which is almost unthinkable what the implications might be. But for me, I insist that we don't know. I think you know, we're going to continue to see progress on many scientific fronts, but progress is quite a complicated idea, and technological developments always interact with the social context. So, you know, we're already seeing increasingly problematic effects of climate change, for example, and that might be made worse. You know, AI, for example, is sucking up tons of emissions and has huge environmental consequences. Democratic politics, we're now seeing endangered all over the world, you know, undermined by this kind of new media ecology where big data, AI, surveillance technologies all work together, and you know, seem to be leading to the rise of autocracies and so on throughout society. You know, we're probably going to see increasingly tense and fractured geopolitical context. The specter of nuclear war is rising, unfortunately, again. So there are huge uncertainties over all these things, as well as AI development. You know, like I said, questions of artificial general intelligence and super intelligence, what that could mean for automation and the job market, maybe massive amounts of people unemployed, you know, the end of social mobility. We've also got questions around the ability of AI to increase social ordering in a way that, you know, isn't understood by most people. So there's all sorts of possibilities, interconnecting things, dangerous developments. So, you know, we can speculate about the you know, the pace of the change of AI and what other things that might, what other possibilities that might open up. And I'm not somebody who's completely skeptical. I don't deny these things are a possibility. I think longevity, escape velocity by 2035 sounds a bit ambitious and unlikely, but I wouldn't be amazed if in our lifetime, certainly in yours, you're a fair bit younger than me. So maybe, you know, maybe you'll have the opportunity to live hundreds, thousands of years. You never know. You know, I wouldn't be completely amazed just because of the pace of change. But I think what we can't do is predict the future because the level of complexity is so vast, and technological developments always interact with this social unfolding. These other problems emerge. So, yeah.
Okay. And now that we're getting closer to the end of our interview, there is this kind of personal question. If you could enhance one aspect of the human body or mind today, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, that, because my instinct is to say human ethics, you know, and actually when I mentioned that exhibition at the Welcome Center, you know, years ago, it was a transhumanist thinker called Julian Savulescu who was talking about enhancing human ethics. And I thought, that sounds like a pretty good idea. You know, the world's in a pretty bad state because of our ethics. But when you realize what that would imply, that's still somebody getting to decide this is the ethics that are correct. You know, in other words, it's people in power, and those people are usually not very ethical. So it's highly unlikely that the ethics they would enforce would be, you know, good ones. Let's be honest. So, you know, despite me wanting to kind of improve human ethics, I you know, I understand what a complicated wish that is, and realize that if we did start trying to enhance ethics, it probably wouldn't have very good outcomes. So that, you know, it's difficult. Again, what do we mean by enhancement, you know? But so for me, really, I think it's much more about improving our social structures. That's what I'd like to see enhanced. I think that would give us the best chance of conceptualizing the enhancement of humans differently from the current kind of view, which is individualistic. It's reflective of this kind of capitalist individualism and greed and power and control, all of these kind of ideas. So, you know, I think that ultimately leads to a kind of unjust version of techno-human evolution. You know, we could talk maybe a bit more about equality as well, because that's a big factor here. These big questions of how do we ensure transhumanism is a process that ensures equality, you know. So yeah, those are the things. So lots to think about there. I mean, of course, I'd love to take a pill and, you know, make myself 20 years younger and live forever and be able to live amongst the stars and see the future of the universe. All of that would be amazing, but I think it's a little bit fanciful for my current state.
All right. And so what advice would you give to young scientists and students interested in the future of transhumanism, or in the fields that, for example, many people that will be watching this video and interview are biotechnologists. So what would you have to say to them?
I would say don't just study science, and do not fall into the trap of thinking that science can solve human problems. Study philosophy as well, study art and literature as well. However far we get with developing technoscience, political questions about who benefits, who suffers, whose world is being built, and with what hidden assumptions are always going to remain. And those other disciplines are the only way you're going to ever understand those things. So, ethical, philosophical, political questions are key, and you can end up serving very dark forces by accident unless you understand those forces, unless you study those forces. So first and foremost, I would say be humane, be compassionate, be inclusive, be kind, think about vulnerable, marginalized groups, and think about the impacts techno-scientific progress may have on those people. Don't fall for the idea that scientific progress leads to ethical progress. Understand that ethics can't be solved. That's what I'd say.
Wow, that was a pretty good advice. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And so if the viewers want to follow your research and know more about you and the field that you're studying, what are the ways for them, so we can also put for them to follow you?
Sure. I've got a website which is posthumanfutures.com. I'm on Blue Sky at Posthuman Futures. I'm on X at Posthuman Theory, bit different. I don't know why. There's also intothefuture.io, which is a website for a kind of creative project I'm doing about the future. And that also contains a podcast series called The A to Z of the Future, which you can give a listen to. There's a whole series on transhumanism on there, where I've interviewed many big transhumanists. You can also read my book, which is open access, so it's free for anybody to download and read online, which is at Bristol University Press. The book is called The Politics and Ethics of Transhumanism, Techno-Human Evolution and Advanced Capitalism, so it's a bit of a mouthful. There's also a kind of media articles, popular, accessible media articles that I've written on the conversation, so you can find out all my work, and feel free to get in touch with me if you've got any questions, or if you ever want to chat about anything further.
Thank you so much. It was a very interesting speech, and we are really honored to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish you a great New Year, because it's Persian New Year. I forgot to say Happy Nowruz. So,
Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you all.
Thank you, and wish you the best, and hope that we see the coolest developments in transhumanism as soon as possible.
Let's hope so. Okay.
Good. Thank you so much. Hope to see you in great transhumanistic developments in the future. Thanks
so
much
for inviting me. Good to speak to you. Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Goodbye.